Chapter 181 Underground Dark River containing Blade Intent, Ruins? This thought steeply surfaced in Chumo's mind. One time. It made him unable to resist sucking in a breath of cool air, and his heart even set off waves of shock. Why did the gathering technique suddenly evolve? Could it be because my cultivation has risen to the 8 desolate exalted realm? Chumhum pondered darkly. Suddenly, he thought of the silver flower that he had swallowed in the underground cave back then, and he especially remembered that part of the points of light that the silver flower had transformed into escaped into his limbs and the violet mansion, while the vast majority of them drifted into his brain area. Later after the awakening, those points of light that escaped into the violet mansions of his limbs and bones allowed his dragon elephant undying scripture and great diffusion divine light mysteries to be drastically enhanced. Beyond that, he only felt his ears and eyes clearing and his essence becoming more relaxed at that time. Chumo did not care. But now look. Murphy. The point of light that floated toward my mind was not without effect, but it boosted my gathering skills? Chumo thought darkly. At this point, that's the only explanation that makes the most sense. After figuring this out, a surge of excitement surged in Chumo's heart. The gathering technique was originally only able to gather from corpses without knowing what talents and chances there were in the corpses, but now that it had evolved, the information that could be seen was much more detailed. No doubt about it. This becomes more usable and convenient for Chummer. It's a bit of a shame though. The power of this Class 7 fierce beast lies in its bloodline, and although the Berserk talent is also a very rare and special talent, once this talent is in operation, it will lose its sanity. Chumo shook his head, feeling some regret in his heart. Neither the bloodthirsty Berserker crocodile's bloodline nor the Berserker talent was what he needed. After all, if the bloodline was fused, then Chumo's foundation would become refuted, and perhaps the traits of a bloodthirsty Berserk crocodile would appear on his body, in which case, what difference was there between this and a martial artist from the 10,000 Beasts sect? And the Berserker talent will make him lose his mind. It's also a double-edged sword with a lot of hidden dangers. That was why after careful consideration, Chumo finally gave up. A collection. Chumo cancelled the fusion of bloodline and Berserk talent and just collected the bloodthirsty Berserk crocodile's essence blood within his carry-on space. In comparison, the essence blood of a 7th-level ferocious beast was a bit more useful to him. Only after doing this did Chumo let out a long breath, and then he shifted his gaze to the place where the heavenly star blade bamboo was growing on the side. The last time Chumo came here, he had cut down all of the heavenly star blade bamboo in this place. And now again, it was found that some shoots of the blade bamboo had actually appeared again in this place. Though they were all still very small, and if they wanted to grow to that size previously, I'm afraid it would take at least 100 years. But there's no doubt about it. This meant that underneath the heavenly star blade bamboo, there was definitely a heavy treasure. Excavate. Without the slightest hesitation, Chumo directly raised the autumn killing blade and began to excavate along the underside of the heavenly star blade bamboo. Boom! As the blade chopped down, a 10-meter deep crater immediately appeared in the ground. Seeing this, Chumo could not help but show a flash of surprise on his face. To this day, with Chumo's strength nowadays, if a blade went down and chopped on the earth, it would at least be able to carve out a small canyon that was hundreds of miles long and up to 100 meters deep. But now that he had actually only just chopped out a crater of more than 10 meters, this was extremely strange. Chumo carefully observed, and immediately realized that it was originally caused by the root veins of the heavenly star blade bamboo in the ground. These bamboo roots were disjointed and intertwined, forming a huge network of roots under the ground, and they were very hard. According to Chumo's estimation, if it was an ordinary 4-direction Shingon, even an all-out strike would not be able to cut them off. After figuring this out, Chumo began to bore down and continue digging. One cut, another. Chumo himself didn't know how many times he had swung, and at this moment, he had reached tens of kilometers from the ground. And here, there are still dense bamboo roots. According to Tremor's estimation, don't look at the fact that the number of these astral blade bamboos wasn't much, but I'm afraid that their bamboo roots had spread to at least tens of thousands of miles of area in a circle. That is to say, within this area of tens of thousands of miles, digging up a piece of ground at random, one could discover the root veins of the heavenly star blade bamboo. What a strong survivability! Chumo couldn't help but be secretly shocked. Another half-hour passed. Chumo had already dug underground a full 100 kilometers from the surface. At that moment, he finally felt a faint fluctuation of blade intent. This made Chumo couldn't help but be energized. Then once again, he fought and dug towards the place where the blade intent came from. Soon. Kaching. Along with Chumo's slash that severed the stone wall in front of him, the front suddenly opened up. A raging underground dark river then appeared in front of Chumo. Claptrap. The dark merge was raging, and when it circulated, it emitted a deafening sound that, upon closer inspection, sounded like a dragon's roar noteworthy. This dark river, however, contained a faint blade intent, while the stones that the dark river flowed through, which appeared a crystal clear white color, all emitted a faint blade intent as well. Chumo was able to feel that the further upstream of the dark river these blade intentions went, the denser they became, and the further downstream they went, the weaker they became. So it seems. The secret should be in the upper reaches of the dark river. Chumo thought darkly. Then directly afterward, he followed this dark river in the direction from which the circulation came. This dark river was very long. Chumo traveled all the way, at his speed for half an hour, at least tens of thousands of miles, but still had not gone to his destination, as if it was completely at the end. But as he moves forward, the dark river contained in the knife intention is also gradually enhanced, the river in the stone is also gradually then more and more crystal, the color is more and more light at the end of the day. It even took on a pure crystal color. One could vaguely see strands of sharp blade chi roaming through these crystals, and even Chumo felt the sharpness. What a terrifying blade intent! Tremor was a little alarmed. To know the saber intent contained in these stones was only because of the weak saber intent wrapped in the dark river circulation, which had been created under the wash of countless years. It's unimaginable. How terrifying should the mysterious treasure at the source that caused all this be? Chumo continued to walk forward, and the intensity of his blade intent gradually increased. Kaching. Kaching. When Chumo had traveled some distance again, the stones within the river channel suddenly broke apart. Immediately, a blade chi burst out and chopped towards Chumo's body along with a clang sound of gold and iron coming out. The blade chi chopped at Chumo's body and instantly crumbled. Instead, Chumo's physical body only left a white dot, and then the light turned and the white dot disappeared. This has reached the might of an 8 desolate exalted one. Chumo predicted, then continued on. At this moment, the blade intent wrapped in these dark rivers had been extremely strong, and the stones in the river had even turned into pure blade stones, containing a blade chi so dense that it was difficult to date. Whoosh! 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 A terrifying blade chi was pulled by Chumo's aura, then shot out from the stone and chopped towards Chumo. It landed on his body, thus leaving a faint mark. This already has peak 8 desolate exalted strength. Deeper. A thick blade chi surged forth, constantly chopping at Chumo's body. Pfft. Accompanied by the sound of blade chi entering the flesh came, a wound appeared on Chumo's bodice already starting to hurt. This strike is infinitely close to the strength of the King realm. The further he went, the stronger the blade aura became. Nowadays, it had already reached infinitely close to the King realm, and if it continued to move forward, I was afraid that the next step would be to truly possess the strength of the King realm. And as Chumo's spiritual power probed past, he found that the front was still endless, seemingly never-ending. Am I going to stop here? Tremor was a little reluctant. By now, he was certain that there was definitely an exceedingly heavy treasure ahead. But he could only be trapped by his strength and couldn't go there. This mood of sitting on a mountain of treasure but not being able to get it made him depressed. Go a little farther, and if you can't, back off. Chumo secretly decided. So he directly operated all his defensive talents and swept towards the front with all his might. Boom boom boom. All the way. A blade chi stored in the stone was induced by him and filled out, chopping towards him, but they were all hardened by Chumo. It didn't take long. There was already the appearance of a blade chi that was truly comparable to the king realm. Chumo could only bring out the autumn-killing blade as well, constantly staging and blocking. Half an hour later. Quite a few injuries gradually appeared on Chumo's body, because of the constant and uninterrupted attacks, so much so that even the wood attribute talent was somewhat unable to heal. Coupled with the fact that Chumo's yuan power was also overly consumed, this gradually made him somewhat unable to resist. Good on. Right about this time. He suddenly saw a waterfall appear in front of him, and the water of those dark rivers was flowing because of the waterfall. Finally, we're at our destination. Chumo's spirit was lifted afterward. He directly operated his spatial talent, and with a few instantaneous movements in succession, he crashed through the waterfall and left that dark river. Behind the waterfall was an underground space that was too large to imagine. Chumo stood in midair and raised his eyes to look around. The waterfall at the source of that dark river was found to arise from an overhanging boulder above. On the giant rock, there was an extremely luxurious palace. In the distance, there was a mountain peak that hung upside down from the top, rising and falling, and from afar, it looked like a stalactite column. As for the ground, there is a building that has been built in a staggered manner, and you can't see the edge of it at a glance. What was even more shocking to Chumo was, within this space, everywhere was filled with a thick aura of swords. They even formed a sheet of white mist as a result, floating in the void. They intertwined, spanned, twisted, and spun around each other, sometimes swimming around, sometimes floating motionless, or transforming into flowers, grasses, and trees, or animals at varies. Could this be an underground ruin? Looking at the scene in front of him, Chumo could not help but reveal a touch of shock on his face as he murmured to himself. Chapter 182 8 King Realm Puppets, Terrifying Sword. After scanning around, Chumo finally decided to explore the palace on the hanging boulder first. There is the source of the blade energy. With this thought, Chumo flew directly to this huge rock. Under close observation, to see the palace in the end is how majestic, standing in front of, you can feel a heavy sense of oppression invasion, so that people cannot help but in the heart of a sense of worship. What a strong pressure! Chumo was a bit shocked in his heart. And just as he was watching, suddenly, a ripple suddenly appeared on the periphery of the palace, and then a light curtain was abruptly born, enveloping the entire palace along with Chumo in the meantime. An extremely harsh white blade chi was born out of thin air, hanging in the sky above the large formation's light curtain. Afterwards, they actually shot towards Chumo. Seeing this aberration, Chumo wasn't the least bit surprised. After all, such a mysterious palace would definitely have some means of guarding it. Therefore, facing the sword chi that shot out, Chumo directly operated his wind attribute talent, and the shadowless phantom steps were executed at the same time, and his entire person instantly disappeared from his original location. The blade chi that was born out of thin air struck where Chumo originally stood, causing the formation to shake for a while, but then it absorbed this blade chi, thus generating another blade chi. Boom. 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 A blade chi continuously chopped towards Chumo's body, each of which contained an extremely terrifying power, and when it whistled, even the void could be broken open, cutting out one pitch-black spatial crack after another. But none of these blade chi landed on Chumo's body. Instead, he constantly relied on his stance to dodge them. One time, on the entire platform, one could only see Chumo's residual shadow constantly flashing. In the blink of an eye, a few moments had passed. It was as if there was no end to the blade chi that was born from the large formation, and it had been tirelessly condensing, chopping, and then condensing again. This can't go on. These blade chi can be absorbed by the formation, thus generating it cyclically. If I don't break through this grand formation, I'm afraid it can wear me out. Thinking so, Chumo directly operated his pupil art talent, and in an instant, a pair of white lights shone out of his eyes. An intermediate pupil talent that can see through the breaks in any object. At this moment under his gaze, Chumo had quickly discovered the weakness of this grand formation, and so he directly drew out the autumn killing blade, and the chi and blood in his body immediately ran wildly. His yuan power erupted like a volcano, and under the 300-fold increase, he slashed at a certain light curtain in the void. Kaching! A sound as if a mirror had shattered rang out. All the blade chi in the large formation froze in midair in an instant. Next moment, the entire grand formation shattered with a loud bang. Without the hindrance of the formation, Chumo finally arrived in front of this palace. With a gentle lift of his hand, the doors of this palace burst open. Step into it. Hera saw that this was an extremely empty hall, and at the end of the hall, there was a high platform. On the high platform, a sword was offered. A long sword that was golden in color and emitted a terrifying aura. Seeing this, Chumo's eyes immediately narrowed slightly from that blade. Chumo felt a dangerous aura. Buzz! Just as Chumo was observing the long sword, a ripple suddenly appeared in the hall, and then on both sides of the hall, 8 huge figures appeared, each wearing armor, as if they were heavenly gods. They exuded an extremely powerful aura, and when they stood in front of them, it was as if they were facing the abyss directly. But the weird thing is, each of these 8 figures did not have any vitality, and their pupils were even devoid of any color, as if they were dead things. It's a puppet. 8 puppets, comparable to the king realm. Feeling the aura coming from these puppets, Chumo couldn't help but change his face drastically, and his heart even set off shocking waves. What kind of a relic is this? There would actually be 8 puppets, comparable to the king realm level to guard them? And what realm is that knife? Thoughts tumbled through his mind, giving birth to one question after another. And just as Chumo was thinking this way, the moment these 8 puppets seemed to sense the unfamiliar aura, a flame suddenly appeared at their pupils and burned, and then they seemed to come to life as if they were alive, fixing their gazes on Chumo's body. How dare you trespass? Kill without mercy. Voices like muffled thunder rang out from their mouths. Without the slightest emotion or fluctuation, it was like a judgment from the gods. As the words fell, they raised the long knives in their hands and chopped towards Chumo. Shasta. An unspeakably terrifying pressure instantly invaded, wrapped in an extremely harsh blade intent that seemed to want to chop Chumo's body and soul all to pieces. Chop. Chumo did not retreat, instead, his body flashed and rushed directly in front of a king realm puppet, his body's chi, blood, and yuan power stirred, and then a blade chopped down. Shasta, an extremely terrifying red-colored blade chi immediately appeared across the sky, as if it was a pike that was abruptly born, directly landing on this puppet. The blade chi chopped out by the latter did not have the slightest power to block it, and it directly shattered with a loud bang. Then Chumo's red-colored blade chi continued its momentum and directly landed on the puppet's blade, shattering it once again and finally chopping it on the puppet's body. Kaching! Only a crisp sound could be heard, and the puppet's head was instantly chopped off. At the same time, a bit of flame flew out from the puppet's head, trying to escape into the void. This is the core of the soul that manipulates the golem. Seeing the situation, without the slightest hesitation, Chumo directly exerted the great diffusion divine light, accompanied by the divine light flying and flickering, annihilating this point of flame in an instant after doing this. The attack of the other 7 puppets arrived this time. Chumo performed the shadowless phantom steps without haste, instantly dodging these terrifying blade chi before flying to the back of the puppet. 10% perfection blade intent operated. The blade domain was cast out. Metallic Upanishad enhancement. Xian Tian drew his sword and chopped. Many talents are open in unison. Chumo's strength soared to an extremely terrifying realm in time. These 7 puppets didn't last long before they were chopped down by Chumo one after another, following in the footsteps of the first puppet. This was followed by the great diffusion divine light flying out, annihilating the soul cores of these puppets. Soon, all the dust of battle settles. From the time the puppets appeared to the time they died in droves, it all added up to no more than 3 minutes, yet Chu Mo had already killed 8 puppets that were comparable to the king realm. The reason why? It was certainly because these puppets were ultimately just puppets and did not have the flexibility of a king realm powerhouse, but the greater reason was still that Chu Mo's strength nowadays had already reached an extremely terrifying point. So much so that not even an ordinary king realm could cause him much trouble. Perhaps only late king realm or even peak king realm, or king realm powerhouses with special talents, such as King Bright Light, King Thousand Leaves, and King Songhai, were able to contend with Chu Mo. After resolving these troubles, Chu Mo couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. This then led towards the end of the palace. This period, he had been mentally tense the entire time, vigilantly surveying his surroundings to prevent any more puppets from suddenly appearing. But the good thing is, those 8 King Realm puppets were then all the guarding power, and until Chu Mo came to the precious sword, there was no abnormality. Closer. It was only then that Chu Mo clearly realized that in addition to the long knife being golden in color, the body of the knife was actually scattered with dense and mysterious patterns. At a glance, there was a stern aura that came over one's face, like a long, thin knife, drilling towards the depths of one's soul. This blade chi is actually attacking one's soul, directly. Chu Mo's face revealed a look of surprise, but he did not show any sign of panic. The great diffusion divine light mysteries had already been cultivated by him to the first level of the perfection realm, and his Yuan Shen had already been hammered to be very tough, comparable to golden stone. Not to mention the protection of the Yuan Shen golden wheel, which could not be broken by idle means as expected. Boom! The blade chi fell into the violet mansion, and the terrifying might chopped directly on top of his Yuan Shen. But just as the knife gas was about to chop down, the exterior of the Yuan Shen suddenly had a layer of golden light diffused and born, and when the knife gas fell on it, it only caused a ripple of ripples, and then it calmed down. Next, one invisible blade chi after another poured in. However, none of them had broken through the protection of the Yuan Shen golden wheel. Soon enough, all of these blade chi had dissolved into nothingness. And that's when the mysterious treasure sword in front of him actually trembled once again, still wanting to give birth to some blade chi to attack Chu Mo's soul. Surely Chu Mo was not afraid. However, he was still slightly annoyed in his heart when faced with the constant attacks of a sword. Be honest. Chu Mo directly brought his Yuan Shen out of his body, holding the long knife that was transformed by the Yuan Shen golden wheel, directly defending the air out of thin air, and chopping towards the top of the long knife Shasta. The terrifying pressure of the soul came crashing down like a Tarzan. When this long sword felt such a terrifying Yuan Shen pressure, it immediately trembled slightly and then stopped moving. Looks a lot more honest. Seeing the situation, only then did Chu Mo nod his head in satisfaction, and then he put his Yuan Shen into the violet mansion. The palm of his hand probed out and gripped this long blade. In the moment of holding, the long knives were still slightly resistant. But then Chu Mo released a trace of the aura of the great diffusion divine light once again, and the long blade instantly settled down. It was only then that Chu Mo had the time to take a closer look. Holding it in his hand personally, Chu Mo could only clearly feel just how terrifying the might contained in this blade was. His autumn killing blade was already a 7th-ranked spirit weapon. However, in front of this long knife, it was not worth mentioning at all. It was as if the light of a firefly was compared to the white moon. It couldn't help but feel a little shocked in his heart. What kind of grade is this sword? Thinking so, with a thought in his mind, he used this knife to slice directly towards his finger. Slightly harder. The fingers then seeped out some golden blood. Chu Mo then squeezed hard and a drop of golden blood dripped down. It landed on top of the blade. This is clearly a blood drop. Buzz. The blood was absorbed by the long blade, which immediately released a shuddering sound. Next moment, Chu Mo then realized that he had an additional connection with this long sword in the underworld. And just then. However, he suddenly realized something and couldn't help but gently eke out, and a flash of color appeared on his face. Chapter 183 Pure Yang Immortal Beheading Sword, Star Chart with Recorded Feats. Within this sword, it even has a spirit? Trummer could feel it. Within this long blade, a faint fluctuation of spiritual wisdom came from it. When Chu Mo hadn't yet recognized his blood as his master, he still hadn't discovered it, but at this moment, he had already grasped this blade, so he was able to discover it. Mind contact passed. A voice immediately appeared in Chu Mo's mind. Master. The voice is tender, as if it were a small toddler, so that when one hears it, the image of a well-behaved child can't help but appear in one's mind. Are you the artifact spirit that this blade has spawned? Chu Mo asked. Yes, master. The voice came into his head. Since you are the artifact spirit of the sword, do you know what this sword is called and what is its origin? And what is this place? Chu Mo asked the doubts in his heart. Master, this blade is called the Pure Yang Chopper. I'm not sure of its origin, I only know that it was born a long time ago. The artifact spirit within the knife said, as for what place this is, I don't know, I have only just been born spiritually not long ago. From the time I possessed intelligence, I found myself in this place, and it has already been hundreds of years in the past. The master is the first outsider to come here. Having said that, it paused and then couldn't help but say, Master, can you not erase my spirit? Although I don't know this information, I can learn, and I'm very useful. I'm an artifact spirit, I can work together with my master to make this blade even more powerful. There was some apprehension and unease in his voice. Hearing those words, Chu Mo couldn't help but show a look of contemplation on his face. For weapons that gave birth to a spirit, Chu Mo had once seen some canonical records in the Jinling Great Base. It was said that some strong people would discover the existence of an artifact spirit from a strong spirit weapon after obtaining it. If the spirit of the weapon cooperated with its owner, it would explode with extremely terrifying power, but if the spirit didn't cooperate, it would instead weaken the weapon's power. This is a very unsettling factor. Therefore, all powerful people who sought to play it safe would rather choose to have the spirit of the weapon weakened, and would also erase the artifact spirit contained within. At the very beginning, this thought also arose in Chu Mo's mind. But he looked at the artifact spirit within this Pure Yang Chopper blade named Pure Yang Chopper Immortal Blade, with a look of ignorance and apprehension. After thinking about it, Chu Mo said, I cannot erase your spirit. Thank you, master, thank you, master. The artifact spirit was instantly elated and grateful. Don't get too happy yet. Chu Mo threatened, if you want me to leave you behind, you must cooperate with me fully and not hide anything, otherwise, once I find out, I will immediately erase your spiritual intelligence and won't give you a single chance. Don't worry, master, I will definitely be obedient. It hastened to say with trepidation. That's good. Chu Mo nodded with satisfaction and immediately said, since you already have a spirit, then I'll give you a name. This blade is named Pure Yang Chopping Immortal, so from now on, your name will be called Xiao Chun. Thank you, master, for the name. Artifact Spirit Xiao Chun said happily. Only after naming Little Pure did Chu Mo begin to study this Pure Yang Immortal Chopper in his hand, although he didn't know exactly what the grade of this knife was, but just by being able to give birth to a spirit, as well as the aura that escaped from the knife being far stronger than the autumn killing blade, Chu Mo could tell that the grade of this knife was definitely very high. It had at least reached the 9th rank. It was even far beyond the 9th order. Instilling some yuan qi into the long knife, Chu Mo realized that the light on the knife had steeply increased, and the body of the knife had become even lighter and thinner, and when he swung it with his hand, there was a sensation that it was like an arm in a hand. The void was cut with a black crack where the blade had crossed, and it was only after a few moments that it subsided. What a fast knife. And I don't know what kind of material it's made of. Chu Mo was a little surprised in his heart. But then, a look of excitement spread across his face. With this blade, he now possessed 2 blades. More to the point, Chu Mo was able to sense that this pure young immortal beheading blade was able to withstand extremely terrifying outbursts, and it could completely be used as a blade that contained blade intent. He had practiced the gold-level martial art Shan Tian battling slash. This martial art, although it was called the battling slash, was actually a technique of raising a sword. The focus is not on the drawing of the sword, but on the method of unification and containment of the essence before the 8000. The longer it was kept in reserve, the longer the blade was hidden, and the more powerful the cut would be after it was drawn. At a high level of profundity, one could even reach the point where a single slash could cause the stars and rivers to roll backward. Just. In the beginning, Chu Mo, because he only had one sword, every time he encountered an enemy, he needed to draw his sword to kill them, so his time to raise his sword was all very short, and it was difficult to build up a very powerful sword intent. Now Chu Mo had another sword. And it is also a divine weapon of very high grade. It can be completely used to raise the sword, and it will not be used in normal times, and the only time it will be drawn and sheathed is at critical moments. So much for. I will be able to keep it constantly contained. If I keep the sword for half a year, or even 10 years, then once it is unsheathed, what horrifying power will it produce? Read this. Chu Mo immediately brightened up. He decided on the spot to use the pure young immortal beheading sword to contain it, while the spirit soldier autumn killing blade was to be used for the usual fight against the enemy. But if you want to keep a sword, you must carry it with you, not place it in your carry space. But this pure young immortal beheading sword, it's of a very high grade, outsiders will know at a glance that it's not a mortal product, and it will easily attract covetousness. Chu Mo frowned and murmured at this point. The artifact spirit Xiaqun immediately said, Master, I can control the aura of this blade and completely astringe it. Afterward, Chu Mo saw that all the light emanating from the blade dissipated, and even the mysterious aura was hidden. At first glance, it looked like a long knife with a plain appearance. Well done, Chun. Chu Mo immediately praised. In this way, there are no worries. Chu Mo directly put the pure young immortal beheading blade behind his back and began to contain it. In this palace, other than this sword, there was nothing else, so Chu Mo swept around and left the place. Landing from the overhanging boulder, Chu Mo arrived in front of the building complex that covered a huge area entrance. It was a stone monument that had been mutilated, with traces of some writing on it. Unfortunately, however, the top half had dissipated, and only a vague pattern could be vaguely seen on the bottom half. It's like a writing, but it's like a pattern. Chu Mo couldn't distinguish it either, so he could only record the graphic, and then imprinted it on a jade disc, placing it within his carry-on space. Wait until later if there's a chance to explore some canonical books. Chu Mo thought darkly. His gaze then gazed ahead, a look of anticipation in his eyes. Back when he was in the little leaf-green sky mysterious realm, he had scavenged a large amount of heavenly treasures and cultivation resources in the Divine Sword sect's secret relics. And what kind of treasures could be brought within this even more massive-looking relic in front of us? Thinking so, Chu Mo directly then entered inside and carefully collected and scraped 3 days later. Chu Mo came to the front of the large hall with an ugly look on his face. It's been a few days. He had been scouring the massive complex, but had found nothing. This was because the yuan qi and spirituality contained in these heavenly materials had dissipated. The elixir was even without the slightest medicinal properties, and crushed into slag at the slightest touch. The jade book was even dimmer, and all the information recorded in it could not be accessed. Trummer knew. It's the result of time erosion. Perhaps a long time ago, all of these treasures still possessed strong efficacy, but so much time had passed without being tended to that they were damaged. This result made Chu Mo very disappointed. This is the last of the great halls, hopefully there will be some gains. Chu Mo sighed and murmured. Although he knew it was unlikely, there was still some reluctance in his heart after all push open the door. Walk into it. What he saw when he entered his eyes, not to his surprise, all the formations and some of the buildings within the entire hall had been damaged. Some of the tables and chairs may still appear to be intact, but with the slightest touch, they will be reduced to pieces. Chumo waved his hand and a breeze appeared. The entire building within the hall crumbled in an instant, turning into countless dust drifting away. Seeing this scene, Chumo turned around and intended to leave. Just as he was leaving, out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw some faint patterns and motifs on the wall on one side of the main hall. Chumo immediately walked over. Take a good look around. It was discovered that this pattern was actually very similar to the pattern on the stone tablet outside the complex. The difference is, the lines on the stone tablet were a little more simple and somewhat broken. The lines on this wall, on the other hand, are slightly more elaborate and relatively intact. With his fingers touching it, Chumo could feel a faint fluctuation coming from it. After thinking about it, he suddenly ran the yuan power in his body, and then his fingers began to slide along the lines. Along with Chumo's finger slowly sliding, each intersection point of the lines was as if it was a star, being slowly lit up and emitting a surfeit of luster. A few moments later, Chumo had already lit up all the lines on one wall. And that's when the mutation was sudden. Only to see that after all the lines were lit up, a virtual three-dimensional pattern was actually evolved steeply in front of the wall, followed by a light point that was lit up successively. It looks like a star map, Chumo thought darkly. But immediately afterward, he immediately pushed back this speculation of his. No. This is not a star map. Not true either. It's not just a star map, exactly. This is more like a running chart for some kind of gongfu. Read this. Chumo's eyes immediately flashed with a flash of essence, and then he concentrated on observing it. Don't dare to miss a single detail. Chapter 184, Chopping Spirit Nian Li Forging Yuan Technique, Becoming a Spiritual Nian Master. Soon. This star map had then finished diffracting, and then dissipated with a boing sound, while at the same time the patterns on the wall also seemed to have exhausted all of their vitality, and were thus damaged, falling off from the wall. As for Tremor, on the other hand, he was still standing in place with a look of disbelief on his face. It was difficult to know how long had passed before he came back to his senses and murmured to himself, "This is actually a spiritual thought cultivation method." There is an infinite amount of shock in those words. The so-called spiritual chanting practice, as the name suggests, it is to allow martial artists to cultivate spiritual thoughts, thus awakening as a spiritual nihilist. The cultivation path of the spiritual luminaries was completely different from that of the martial artists. Not only could they cultivate their physical bodies, but they could also cultivate their spiritual nimbus, which was a very magical ability. Not only could they manipulate their spiritual nimbus to attack the enemy's soul, but they could even manipulate their nimbus weapons to decapitate the enemy's physical body. At the beginning, they can have a very powerful strength, and can kill enemies from hundreds or even thousands of meters away. And it's killing people. If one cultivated to the depths of refinement, one could even be able to cut down an enemy with just a thought across tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of miles. So generally speaking, spiritual luminaries were all invincible powerhouses of the same rank, but wanting to become a spiritual numinous master, however, required extremely harsh conditions. One had to awaken the spiritual numinous power. And there has been no figuring out of what exactly spiritual nimbus is so far. Therefore the number of spiritual readers was too small to find a few in the entire human population. So to this day, humans hadn't even formed a complete system for the cultivation of spiritual readers. Chumo had practiced all the way from Luoyang Base and then to Jinling Big Base, and so far he hadn't even seen a spiritual numinous master. Never even heard of it. From this, it was clear just how rare spiritual luminaries really were. And today, Chumo, however, had obtained a spiritual thought power cultivation method from this star map. How strong the shock was in his heart was naturally self-evident. Chopping Spirit Numinous Force Forging Yuan Technique. This was the name of the spiritual numinous power cultivation dharma that Chu Mo had obtained from the star map. Recalling in his mind the wonders about this numinous power cultivation method, Chu Mo murmured, "Follow the method recorded on the spirit beheading numinous power forging yuan technique. There are only 3 ways to cultivate spiritual thoughts. One of them is autonomous awakening. This kind of awakening method that relies on innate talent is very rare, almost 1 in a billion chances are not there. And this kind of autonomous awakening of spiritual thoughts, there are also high and low, poorly qualified for a lifetime cannot be raised, if the qualifications are good, and even be able to awaken immediately after the realization of the strength of the realm of Azuni or even the king. But this kind is so rare that it's almost negligible. The second is to rely on the heavenly soul flower. The heavenly soul flower, an extremely rare heavenly treasure, could allow martial artists to communicate with the brain domain under swallowing, thus awakening spiritual thoughts. Chu Mo naturally did not have this kind of heavenly soul flower. And the third. Instead, it relies on some kind of heaven and earth wonder that can develop the brain domain. It's well known. The human brain has enormous potential and is very mysterious. The average person is actually only developing about 3 to 5% of their brain, while the remaining 90% or more is dormant. If the brain can be developed, it will enable human beings to master all sorts of incredible means. Between heaven and earth, perhaps there will be born some heaven and earth wonders, some of which will be able to develop the human brain domain, so that the human brain development, if the development to a certain extent, perhaps it will allow people to master the absorption of cosmic energy, so as to awaken the ability of spiritual power. Thinking of this, Chu Mo couldn't help but reveal a flash of essence in his eyes. These 3 methods of awakening spiritual nimbus, the first and second of which, could be ruled out outright. As for the third, because Chu Mo had once swallowed a silver flower, thus developing his brain area to a certain extent, it gave Chu Mo some faint hope of awakening his spiritual thoughts. So, this third one was the only possibility for Chu Mo to open up his spiritual thoughts. I hope Silver Blossom can give some. Thinking so, Chu Mo immediately plopped down on his knees and assumed the posture of 5 hearts facing the sky according to the requirements of this cultivation method, and then closed his eyes and began to cultivate. The gong method was in operation. Chu Mo's entire mind completely settled into the brain area. He felt that around his own body, some golden points of light appeared, like fireflies, emitting a faint glow. This is cosmic energy, scattered in all corners of heaven and earth. As long as one operated the spiritual chanting cultivation method, one could see their existence through spiritual power. The hardest part then is how to incorporate them into the brain. If there was no awakening of spiritual thoughts, this was equivalent to a martial artist not having a cultivation physique, and naturally, they would not be able to absorb yuan qi into their bodies. So, immediately after sensing these mental abilities, Chu Mo began to tentatively absorb them towards his mind. But no matter how he absorbed it, the energy in these universes was unresponsive and didn't care about him at all. Could it be that I really haven't awakened my spiritual thoughts? There was some disappointment in Chu Mo's heart. It was so hard to obtain an extremely precious and rare method of cultivating spiritual thoughts, but as a result, he was unable to cultivate it. How could this make him willing? Keep trying. Chu Mo gathered his distracting thoughts and concentrated on his gong method as he continued to try to absorb it. It was just that no matter how much Chu Mo inhaled, the cosmic energy didn't have any reaction. Chu Mo, on the other hand, was not discouraged and was still frantically running his gongfu. What Trummer didn't know was this. Just as he was frantically functioning, at this moment in his brain area, a silver-colored point of light suddenly flew around from Chu Mo's brain area. If only Trummer could see it. Then he can tell the difference. These silver-colored points of light, surprisingly, were all the points of light that flew to the brain area part after the silver flower dispersed, but the number of these points of light was much less than the total number that had flown in. That was because the vast majority of the points of light were in the brain area to help Chu Mo evolve the gathering technique. And a portion of the remaining points of light sank down on that. At this point, As Chumo constantly wanted to try to absorb the cosmic energy and run the method of spiritual thought cultivation, it caused Chumo's brain to run at a rapid pace, and these points of light became active as a result. A few moments later, they seemed to figure out Chumo's intentions, and then they all rallied and dove headfirst into the brain domain, rapidly fusing and developing his brain. Buzz. Chumo, who was trying to absorb the cosmic energy, suddenly felt that this particle of cosmic energy in front of him suddenly trembled. Subsequently, it was actually like a meteor that flew directly towards his mind. Seeing this scene, Chumo immediately froze. But immediately afterward, a flash of ecstasy steeply surfaced in his heart. Could it be that I've successfully absorbed the cosmic energy? Rumble. Just for a moment he was happy for it. There was a sudden, earth-shattering roar in his head, followed by a wave of weariness that spread throughout his body from deep within his brain. Next moment, Chumo then blacked out and his consciousness entered a magical place. This mysterious place was boundless, and its interior was filled with infinite chaos, making it impossible to distinguish between the concepts of the upper and lower universes and time and space. And in the center of this mass of chaotic nothingness, there was a mysterious object that was slowly rotating at the moment. No matter how much Chumo looked, he could not make out the shape of the object. Could this be my brain? Looking at this scene, such a thought suddenly surfaced in Chumo's mind, and just then, a golden point of light broke through the chaos and arrived here. Then under Chumo's gaze, it slowly drew closer towards the mysterious mass of objects, and eventually, it completely fitted. Shasta. A sharp pain spread throughout his body. The pain was so strong that it even made Chumo feel that his consciousness was about to be torn apart. Tremor couldn't see it though. However, he could feel that his Yuanshan was trembling, and even his flesh was afraid that it had cracked. However, Chumo was still gritting his teeth. He had a hunch. This was his only chance to awaken his spiritual nimbus. If he missed this time, I'm afraid he would never be able to become a spiritual nimbus master again. Therefore, even if he had to bear the risk of his Yuanshan shattering, his consciousness tearing, or even his physical body crumbling, he had to persevere. A wave of pain like a tidal wave kept coming, one stronger than the other, one more painful than the other. It caused Chumo's Yuanshan to gradually disperse, and his consciousness began to blur. The flesh, moreover, began to emanate an aura of death. No doubt about it. If this continued, Chumo would absolutely die. However, just for a moment, the sliver of golden light finally merged completely with the mysterious object in the chaos. Immediately after, a dazzling golden light radiated out steeply, reflecting Chumo's entire mind in a bright light. As for Chumo's consciousness, it was also completely blurred and lost in the instant this golden light swept over him. After a long time, Chumo turned around leisurely. Have I failed after all? The thought had just surfaced in his mind. It then abruptly changed before its eyes and found its consciousness entering a strange space. Heck, it was right in the middle of his brain area. Only a little bit of golden light particles penetrated in from the outside world, and then were quickly transformed and absorbed, turning into a floating mist surrounding the brain. Chumo's consciousness was able to clearly feel that these golden grains of light were, quite literally, cosmic energy. I can absorb cosmic energy. Did. Seeing this scene, Chumo immediately froze, then he seemed to have steeply thought of something, immediately running the spirit beheading spirit forging yuan technique, crazily absorbing the cosmic energy from the outside world. One time, the tiny particles that floated everywhere around his body passed through all parts of Chumo's body and continuously entered his mind. Sure enough, I really have become a spirit nemesis. A flash of ecstasy instantly appeared on Chumo's face. Chapter 185 Thought Weapon, Searching for Star Gold. Go. At this moment, Chumo looked at the mist floating around his brain, and as his consciousness touched it, he could clearly feel the mysterious energy contained within. That's the spiritual chanting. Seeing the situation, Chumo couldn't help but have a look of ecstasy spread across his face. It was so exciting that every cell in the body came alive with it. Spiritual chanting masters. He had finally become a psychic reader. Try how powerful it is. Chumo was a little impatient to try something. He stood up, his eyes looked around, and with a movement in his heart, an invisible force escaped. Next moment, a magical scene appeared. Only to see that the entire hall, which was originally littered with the dust of various broken buildings, suddenly all levitated at this moment. And after doing so, Chumo realized that he actually didn't feel the slightest bit of strain, so he had another thought in mind. Next moment, the entire hall first shook slightly, and then it actually rose up from the ground with a bang, suspended in midair. After controlling so many things, I'm surprised I haven't felt the limit yet. Keep trying and see where my limits really are. Thinking so, Chumo walked out of the great hall and came outside. His eyes scanned the many halls below, and then with a thought, his spiritual thoughts exploded out. Rumble. One after another, a large hall was lifted from the ground and suspended in midair. In a flash, hundreds of halls had already been lifted up one after another. It wasn't until Chumo lifted 200 halls that he finally felt the strain. Looks like this is my limit. When Chumo cancelled his thoughts, these halls fell to the ground with a loud bang and then smashed into pieces. Subsequently, Chumo fixed his gaze on the upside-down mountain peak above him again. Boom. A small mountain peak suddenly snapped in the middle, followed by countless mountain rocks and earth falling down, with the only piece of ore containing gold and iron remaining in midair. Under the urging of Chumo's thoughts, these ores quickly fused together and eventually coalesced into a very huge iron pillar, which then rotated and twisted crazily, causing the first half of it to become sharp and pointed. Go. Chumo's mind moved. Next moment, only to see this huge sharp iron pillar rapidly shooting out, like a bolt of lightning, directly shooting towards the inverted mountain peak above. Under the terrifying speed, this sharp iron pillar instantly ran through a mountain peak. That's not all. Immediately after that, Chumo's mind moved again. This massive iron pillar then instantly dispersed into a smaller iron needle. There were a lot of them, and at a cursory glance, there were at least thousands of them. Whoosh. 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 Thousands of iron needles were frantically saved towards the ground, leaving a deep, bottomless pit wherever they passed. In the twinkling of an eye, the whole earth was beaten into a sieve. This is already comparable to the might of the Four Directions town generals. Chumo secretly assessed the situation, and then his face couldn't help but show a touch of shock. Although the strength of the Four Directions town generals was not worth mentioning to today's Chumo. But know this. Chumo had only just awakened his spiritual thoughts. First to third order, psychic nemesis. Fourth to sixth order, spiritual spiritist. Seventh to ninth order, spiritual Shan master. This was the system of the spiritual numinous master realm as recorded in the spirit-chopping numinous force-forging elemental art. At present, Chumo has only just entered the first order, and is still only a glimpse of the doorway. The power of the mind is already comparable to the four sides of the town generals. If it reaches the second order? What if it reaches the second stage? What about even cultivating to a spiritual spirit master or even a spiritual Shan master? Session's end. What kind of terrifying strength should it possess? More importantly, the means of attack possessed by spiritual luminaries was spiritual numinous power, which was an extremely magical ability. As long as one's spiritual numinous power was strong, one could do anything divine. For example, previously, Chumo had used his mind power to change the shape of the iron pillar. This was still only his initial mastery of spiritual nimbus, and his use of nimbus was not yet pure. If Chumo's control over his Nyanli became refined, he could even change the nature of objects. An analogy. If a martial artist attacked with a long sword, it would only take a single movement of the mind to rub that martial artist's long sword into pieces. What kind of terrifying tactic is this? Not to mention that at the realm of spiritual masters and even Shan masters, they even possessed the ability to mentally influence reality. It's safe to say If it was about growth potential, spiritual luminaries were clearly higher than martial artists. At the same time, the attack methods of the spiritual luminaries were also more mysterious and incredible. Of course, that's not to say that psychic readers are really perfect. Being physically weak was the most fatal disadvantage of a spiritual reckoner. Once the numinous power was depleted, any random martial artist could cut him down. Also, in a harsh environment, martial artists were more capable of surviving than spiritual readers. But this was of no consequence to Chumhum. He practiced both martial arts and spiritual thoughts, and even possessed a Yuan Shen, which meant that Mo was all-round and had almost no weaknesses. Martial arts, genjutsu, and spiritual chanting masters, all three are developing in tandem. While I use my martial arts to fight against my enemies on weekdays, with the aid of the great diffusion divine light, my identity as a spiritual illuminator can then become my bottom card and killer mace. Thinking so, Mo could not help but reveal a flash of brilliance in his eyes. Next, Mo practiced the chopping spirit numinous force forging yuan technique here again, consolidating the realm of the spiritual numinous master for a while, and then experimented with all sorts of means of spiritual numinous force, trying out all sorts of whimsical ideas in his mind like a child who had just gotten a new toy. And during this period of time, Mo also discovered something. That is, the consumption caused by attacking purely with the power of thoughts would be great almost as quickly, it was consumed. And the means of attack against the enemy is quite one-dimensional. If spiritual luminaries were just that, even though they were powerful, it would simply be impossible for them to have such a high status. With this doubt, Mo carefully flipped through the chopping spirit numinous force forging yuan technique again. Soon. And he found the cause. So the spirit numinaries all have their own numinous weapons. A flash of realization appeared on Mo's face. According to the records on the chopping spirit numinous force forging elemental technique, spiritual numinous masters all had their own unique numinous force weapons, which could be controlled by the spiritual numinous masters at will, and once they were used, they could increase their numinous force to a certain extent, making their power increase greatly. At the same time, the consumption of mental nimbus would be drastically reduced with a nimbus weapon. Only if one wanted to build this kind of numinous weapon, they needed a rare material called star gold. This material. Mo had never heard of it before. It seems that we can only search carefully after returning to the Jinling Big Base. Mo thought darkly. Going back the way he came, Mo quickly returned to the ground. After destroying the cave entrance and destroying all traces of it, Mo then flew away from this place with joy in his heart. This time he was out for a short time though. However, it allowed Mo to reach the pure young immortal chopper of extremely high grade. He had even cultivated the chopping spirit numinous force forging elemental technique to the point of initiation, causing him to smoothly become a spiritual numinous master. The harvest can be huge. Road. Mo carefully cleared his strength. Now that I have raised my cultivation to the 8 desolate exalted realm, if I want to raise my strength, I need to use heavenly materials and earthly treasures and perform a second resonance. In addition, my great diffusion divine light mysterious code has already reached the first layer of perfection, and I'm not far from the second layer, so it's a good time to take advantage of this period of time to cultivate with all my might, and strive to condense the second Yuanshan golden wheel as soon as possible. There's also the dragon elephant imperishable scripture, which has also reached the point of perfection at the second layer. If I can raise it to the third layer and break the third physical body extreme realm, it will allow me to receive a 400-fold extreme increase in strength. Of course. Most importantly, it's still the spirit nemesis. Cultivate the chopping spirit conceptual force forging yuan technique with all my might, and strive to ascend to the first stage of perfection or even the second stage as soon as possible, and possess the strength that can deal with the king realm, so that it can truly become my killer mace and bottom card. At the same time, the star gold should be searched for with all my might. With the increase of the numinous weapon, it will allow me to utilize a more powerful numinous attack. Lastly, there are the various mysteries, all of which need to be envisioned and studied. A careful reckoning. Chumo realized that he still had a lot of things to do, and he was very busy. However, Chumo did not feel any dissatisfaction. Instead, he was enjoying himself. Because he knows it well. All of these things can make him grow in strength. In martial arts cultivation, one is not afraid of being busy, but is most afraid of not having anything to do. Take, for example, the participation in the arcane. Many martial artists located at the peak of the Eight Wastelands exalted realm, they could only stay stuck at this realm because they were unable to comprehend the axioms, and they could not advance an inch for decades or hundreds of years, and they could only waste their lifespans in vain. Those strong people who were able to realize the Upanishads, on the other hand, were able to keep their strength growing. That's the difference. In a nutshell. The busier the martial artist, the faster their strength grew. 1 hour later. Chumo returned to the large base in Jinling. Did not immediately go back, but first went to the Tianji Pavilion. After making a tour, found that everything up and down the pavilion is running as normal, and only then let the people will chase the wind to call, "The court wants to see me?" Chasing Wind, who was assigning tasks in the deacon's hall, learned of Chumo's arrival and asked to see him by name, and didn't dare to be the slightest bit slow, immediately putting down the matter at hand and hurriedly rushing over. Inside the core hall. When Wind Chaser arrived, he happened to see Chumo standing in the middle of the great hall. A breath of deep like the sea, especially that pair of eyes is as deep as a deep pool, so that chasing the wind at a glance, the heart and soul wildly trembling. "Haven't seen you for a while, Pavilion Master has become much stronger again." Wind Chaser couldn't help but marvel in his heart. Not daring to look at it more, Chasing Wind immediately collected his mind and bowed, "Greetings, Pavilion Master." "Elder Wind Chaser, please rise." Chumo waved his hand, then said, "This time, I came over because there is a mission that needs to be released." Still at the beck and call of the court master. Hearing this, Wind Chaser hurriedly said, "Star Gold. Have all the martial artists up and down the pavilion keep an eye out for a treasure called Star Gold, and whoever is able to find it, or even provide news back, will be rewarded with 50 billion yuan stones." Chummer opened his mouth. Chapter 186, Inquiring about the news of the superbase in Zhonghai. A reward of 50 billion lower-grade yuan stones? When Wind Chaser released this mission of Chumo's, all the martial artists up and down the Tianji Pavilion were stunned. No one was expecting it. It was surprising that the pavilion master would come up with such a big reward. One must know that even the 8 desolate exalted masters would find it hard to come up with 50 billion lower-grade yuan stones if they hadn't accumulated wealth for more than a decade, not to mention the fact that most of them were only Zongshi, or even martial masters in the realm. "I really wish I could get this fun, pavilion reward, then I would be able to advance to the Jin general realm, or even impact the 8 wastelands venerable one with some backbone. I guess it's hard to get a reward. After all, this is 50 billion yuan stones, and with such a generous reward, I'm sure the treasures to be sought are definitely rare. But try something anyway, what if you just find it? Not bad, what if you hit the big time? Without further ado, I'm going to head out into the wilderness immediately, and I won't rest until I find the Star Gold." The crowd of martial artists were talking, all very emotional. Then they all left the Tianji Pavilion, searching around for news and inquiring about the whereabouts of the Star Gold. After releasing the quest, Chumo went to check on Li Yue and Li Xuanji's siblings again. "Haven't seen you in days." Li Yue's strength had once again grown by leaps and bounds, and had now reached the peak of the Zongshi, and had already begun to impact the 4 directions town general. Such a demonic talent, such a terrifying cultivation speed. Even Chumo couldn't help but marvel at it in his heart. After encouraging her and giving her a lecture on the notes and points of impacting the 4 directions of the town generals, he then summoned Li Xuanji and inquired with the same concern. Li Xuanji was also 14 years old now, and was not far from 15 weeks old. During the period of time in Tianji Pavilion, although he hadn't cultivated yet, Chumo had been giving him the opportunity to use various heavenly materials to cleanse his body. To this day, it had already cleansed the body to an immaculate body, and almost no impurities could be found anymore. More importantly, because of the constant daily use of heavenly treasures to contain and soak the medicinal liquid, causing Li Xuanji's body to contain even more very terrifying and majestic energy, Tremor had no doubt. When he could formally cultivate, with the heavenly flame body and demonic talent he possessed, I'm afraid that his cultivation speed would be even more terrifying than his sister Li Yue. In this regard, Chu Mo was looking forward to it. Back inside the villa, only to find that Chen Shiwei was not there. After Chumo sensed it, he realized that the Sky Rock had arrived outside the base, and after inquiring, he learned that Chen Shiwei had gone out with it to hunt ferocious beasts. So Chu Mo asked Tianpeng to tell Chen Shiwei to be safe. He then returned to the secret realm where he could accelerate his cultivation. Taking out tens of billions of yuan stones and placing them into the grooves, a stream of yuan qi was immediately extracted and escaped between heaven and earth. Seeing the situation, Chu Mo immediately took out the 7th level ferocious beast essence blood that he had collected from the bloodthirsty berserker crocodile and drank it in one gulp. Feeling the raging energy erupting within his body, Chu Mo immediately operated the green cloud yuan power body forging secret art, absorbing yuan qi and slowly tempering his body. Time passes in a hurry. As time passed, Chu Mo's strength grew by leaps and bounds. In the blink of an eye, 20 days had passed. The power of 90,000 elephants. Chu Mo opened his eyes and slowly spat out a number. Within these 20 days, Chu Mo had grown a full 90,000 elephants of strength. It seems to be a good number. But actually, of the 90,000 elephants of power that had grown, close to 30,000 elephants of power had been additionally brought about by the essence blood of a grade 7 fierce beast. His true strength growth, however, was only 60,000 elephant power. If you translate that, you can grow over 2,000 elephants of power almost every day as well. However, it should be known that the reason for such a fast cultivation speed was because Chu Mo had piled up tens of billions of yuan stones in this place, possessing a 20-fold increase in yuan qi, plus the fact that he had just broken through the realm and would have a period of high-speed growth if these external factors were put aside. Perhaps Chu Mo's strength could only reach the power of 1,000 elephants per day. An ordinary 8 desolate exalt's limit physical body power is 5 million elephant powers. If I were an ordinary Zuni, I could smoothly grow by 1,000 elephant power every day, and it would only take me less than 14 years to step into the peak of Zuni. This is definitely an extremely terrifying speed for other exalted ones. But for me, this speed is far from enough. Chu Mo took a deep breath and murmured. After stepping into the 8 desolate exalted realm, Chu Mo could feel that because his depth was too deep, his limits were also higher than ordinary exalted. According to Chu Mo's prediction, at least 10 times the physical strength of an ordinary Zuni should be reached, equal to the power of 50 million elephants. And that means also the fastest he could take would be 100 years to reach the peak of an exalted. This was an outcome that Chumhum could not tolerate. How exactly did those King Realm powerhouses cultivate up there? Chummer was curious. He had more than 10 types of talent and physique bonuses, even 2 Morning Star level talents, but it took so long to cultivate to the Zuni extreme. This was certainly due to his deep roots, which were 10 times that of other exalted masters. But accordingly, Chu Mo's cultivation speed was more than 10 times faster than an ordinary Zuni. So when converted, those martial artists who had stepped into the King Realm, when they were still only in the Zunshur realm at that time, when they cultivated to the Zunshur limit of 5 million elephant power, it took them the same amount of time as it took Chu Mo to cultivate to 50 million elephant power even. They would have to give far longer than Chumhum. But since the great change of heaven and earth, it has been less than 200 years so far. As for the Thousand-Leaf King and the Songhai King, they had both entered the King Realm for hundreds of years, and if they had really spent 100 years going from Zunshur to the King Realm, could it be that they had begun their cultivation from before the great change in heaven and earth? Trummer didn't believe it. These martial artists who were able to break through to the King Realm definitely have methods to speed up their cultivation, it's just that ordinary martial artists don't know about it. The elder brother of the Mo clan's ancestor is the Bright Light King, so he should know some hidden secrets. Thinking so, Chu Mo then left directly from this secret realm and went straight to the headquarters of the Jade Merchant Alliance. In the headquarters of the Jade Merchant Alliance, in an ancient house, Chu Mo and the Mo clan's old ancestor sat opposite each other. Venerable Chu has come to look for old me today. Could it be that he has something to do? The Mo clan's old ancestor asked with a smile. I can't hide it from elder ancestor Mo. This time I came here, there is indeed one thing I want to inquire about. Chummer opened his mouth. But there's no harm in saying it. The Mo clan's oldest ancestor said bluntly. So Chu Mo inquired about his doubts. Upon learning of this matter, the Mo clan's old ancestor directly said, Venerable Chu guessed correctly, my elder brother did indeed tell me that there are ways to speed up cultivation in this world. The words came out. Chu Mo's face immediately showed a flash of surprise. Nothing but. These methods are mastered in the superbase. Old Clan Mo said, as in the case of the Zhonghai superbase that is closest to us, according to my elder brother, the entire superbase is wrapped in a huge formation that is able to absorb yuan qi from the sea into the base, resulting in a very dense yuan qi that is almost more than a few times that of ours here. On top of that, the powerful people of the Zhonghai superbase have also researched a powerful spirit-gathering formation that can speed up cultivation by tens of times, and can even reach hundreds of times. What's more even, there are all sorts of facilities to assist martial artists in their cultivation. It can be said that the development of martial arts in the Zhonghai superbase is very prosperous, and it is almost the most top-notch existence in this world. When my elder brother left from the Jinling Great Base, his cultivation was not high and his talent was only a little bit stronger than mine, but it only took a few decades in the Jinling Great Base to step into the Cave Heavenly King realm, while I am only in the middle of the Zuni stage by now, and there is still a distance to the later stage. Speaking of the end. Old Ancestor Mo's words were filled with emotion and a faint sense of regret, and at this moment, Chummer. After listening to the words of the Mo clan's ancestor, then he was shocked. A formation that was enough to accelerate the speed of cultivation by tens or even hundreds of times. If that was truly the case, then with his talent, wouldn't he only need a year or two to step into the 8 desolate exalted limit? Sure. Trummer also knew that this was impossible. This kind of formation that increased the cultivation speed by hundreds of times would certainly exist, but the conditions for opening it were definitely very harsh, and it must be in the hands of the top powers, and it would be very difficult for ordinary martial artists to be able to go in. But it's undeniable. This represented the prosperous development of martial arts in the Zhonghai superbase. If he was able to go forward to the Zhonghai superbase, he might be able to make his path even longer. Thinking so, Chu Mo then asked, Old Ancestor Mo, can you tell me about the situation of the Zhonghai superbase? Regarding the Zhonghai superbase, Chu Mo had some understanding when he had chatted with the Thousand Leaf King, the Bright Light King, and the Songhai King back then, but it was just some words. Now is the right time to take advantage of this opportunity to make some careful inquiries. Listening to Chu Mo's inquiry, Old Ancestor Mo opened his mouth and said, as for the Zhonghai superbase, I don't know a lot about it either, most of it is learned from my elder brother's mouth. As for myself, I've only been there 2 or 3 times. The thing that impresses me most there is the bustle. Very prosperous. Old Ancestor Mo said, the entire Zhonghai superbase, according to my estimation, has a population of at least tens of millions of people, and its prosperity is almost no less than that of the internationalized metropolis of mankind before the great change of heaven and earth. In addition to the skyscrapers that we also have in our big base in Jinling, the Zhonghai superbase even has numerous public transportation. The scientists there have researched a metastone-centered technological system, which has led to the creation of metastone moving cars, subways, rail transportation, metaforce networks, and so on. Things such as the metastone cars that occasionally appear at the small bases are in fact simplified versions that have gone through countless times. And the air-braking flying boats that are major forces in the Jinling Great Base are also researched by the Zhonghai superbase. On top of that, as one of the top 10 human superbases, the development of martial arts in the Zhonghai Superbase is also very prosperous. Chapter 187 War God Powerhouse, Setting a March Deadline. In the Zhonghai Superbase, a martial artist at the 8 Desolate Zenith level can't even be ranked. Only a martial artist at the Cave Heavenly King realm level can be called a strong one. And according to what my elder brother has said, in the Middle Sea Superland, besides the king level, there are still a higher tier of powerhouses who are called war gods. When he said the words God of War, the voice of the Mo clan's old ancestor were slightly trembling, obviously having some ups and downs in his heart. Warlord? Chummer was a little puzzled. This was the first time he had learned of this appellation, and for a moment he couldn't help but be a little curious about it. To be able to crown a realm with the name God of Battle, what kind of strong person should this be? Nice. The Mo clan's old ancestor said, according to my elder brother, in this realm, the strength has already reached the peak of this world, and they are just like a brilliant sun and an eternal divine mountain standing between the heavens and the earth. It is precisely because of their existence that they were able to block countless ferocious beasts from the human race after the great change in the heavens and earth, opening up space for my human race to survive, and fighting for a say in this chaotic world. It can be said that each and every one of their existence is the most valuable treasure of my human race. Hiss. Listening to the Mo clan's old ancestor's introduction, Chu Mo's mind received a great shock. Although the Mo family ancestor did not recount exactly how powerful the war gods were in these words, but just from the fact that they were able to fight against countless ferocious beasts and carve out a living space for the human race, one could tell just how far they had robbed the world of their strength. I'm afraid. When a war god powerhouse is angry, it's estimated that the earth in the area of hundreds of thousands of miles will sink for it, right? Chu Mo couldn't help but think so. In his heart, he couldn't help but yearn for the Zhonghai Superbase a little more. Read this. He opened his mouth and asked, then, do you know what I need to do if I want to enter the Superbase, Elder Mo? It's not hard to get into the Zhonghai Superbase. Old Ancestor Mo said, if you are only staying for a period of time, you only need to pay a certain amount of money, and the Zhonghai Superbase won't make it difficult. But what is difficult is to completely settle down and become a resident of the Zhonghai Superbase. According to me, there are only 2 ways for an outsider to become a permanent resident. One of them is very difficult for outsiders, but very easy for you, and that is recruitment by the great powers. Speaking of which, old ancestor Mo looked at Chu Mo and laughed. The Tianya Pavilion where my elder brother is from is a major force in the Zhonghai Superbase. If you are willing to join the Tianya Pavilion, I think the Tianya Pavilion will definitely welcome you. Words. Chu Mo couldn't help but laugh bitterly. You know me, old ancestor Mo, I'm used to being free and loose in my day-to-day life, and I don't like to be restrained. Old ancestor Mo naturally understood this, so he shook his head and didn't persuade any further, but instead turned his words around and continued, and this second, well, that's the need to have potential. Potential? Chu Mo frowned, puzzled in his heart. In the Zhonghai Superbase, the potential referred to is the upper limit of future growth, and must be a young person who is under 25 years old and possesses high qualifications, at least one of which needs to have a talent and physique that reaches the upper class. It's either that or reach the exalted realm before the age of 60. Once you fulfill these 2 points, you will be able to obtain a certificate of possession of residence issued by the Zhonghai Superbase and an identity card of the Zhonghai Superbase. Old Man Mo said. I can't believe it's going to be that high. Trummer was a bit surprised. If we go by the standard, I'm afraid that not many people in the Zhonghai Superbase would be able to get a permanent certificate of residence every year. The reason why it's so high is because the certificate of residence and ID card of the Central Sea Superbase contain a lot of gold. Old Ancestor Mo explained, you are unaware, Venerable Chu, that with these 2 things, a martial artist will be able to purchase real estate, work, and do business within the Superbase and enjoy all the benefits and conveniences of the base. If you fall, all your offspring can be well taken care of by the base. If they have martial talent, they will be trained to become martial artists and filled into the city's security forces or army in the future. If they don't have martial talent, they will be arranged for decent civilian jobs. In short, residents with proof of residence and ID cards will have no worries in the Zhonghai Superbase. Because of this, the Superbase is very strict in its scrutiny of the issuance of permanent residence permits. Hearing this explanation, Chu Mo finally understood. This is actually equivalent to the difference between a temporary residence permit and a local resident. Trummer thought carefully in his head. According to what Old Man Mo had said, he actually fit both of these too. Chu Mo had now officially become an 8 desolate exalt, and he was no older than 25 years old. As for Qin Shiwei, although she hadn't reached Zunshi, she was the same age as Chu Mo. As for Li Yuwei and Li Xuanji, there is no need to say more, they definitely meet the criteria. That means they all have access to the Zhonghai Superbase. Just as Chu Mo was thinking like this in his mind, at this moment, old ancestor Mo suddenly took out a jade book from his storage bag and handed it to Chu Mo. Elder Mo, what is this? Chummer was a little puzzled. This is something my elder brother left for you, a detailed roadmap from the Jinling Big Base to the Zhonghai Superbase. Old ancestor Mo smiled and said, at first, although you refused my elder brother's solicitation, my elder brother understood very well that a young hero like you, Venerable Chu, had an unlimited future, and that a mere Jinling Great Base would never be the end of the line for you, and thus when he left, he personally drew this roadmap and asked me to give it to you when you needed it. Hearing this, Chu Mo couldn't help but take a deep breath. Back in the beginning, King Mingguang had given him a generous gift in order to thank him, which contained gold-level martial arts techniques and 7th-level ferocious beast essence blood, plus 10 billion yuan stones, which had already made Chu Mo quite surprised at that time. However, he had never expected that King Mingguang would be able to do this. For a time, it made Chu Mo's heart feel a lot of emotions. After a long enough time, he sighed and said, King Mingguang, what a heart. It's good to be able to help Venerable Chu. Looking at Chu Mo's demeanor, old ancestor Mo knew that he had accepted this favor and couldn't help but feel a little joyful. The map drawn by King Mingguang is indeed of great use to me. I have to say, since I've been cultivating, since I befriended Shanshan from the Luoyang base, and then now, King Mingguang and elder ancestor Mo, you and the others, have all been of great help to me, so naturally, Chu can't go without some indication. Said. Chu Mo then took out a jade booklet from within his carry-on space and said, this item will be taken as a gift of thanks from Chu Mao, in return. Having said that, he placed this jade book on the table and instead gave a farewell to old ancestor Mo and left without waiting for the other party to retain him. Wait for Chummer to leave. The Mo clan's old ancestor picked up this jade book, and when his spiritual power was pasted over, his entire body immediately froze. A gold-level sword codex? All of the Mo family, what they practiced was sword techniques, but there was only one gold-level sword technique martial art in the family. It's powerful though. However, because it was a fire attribute, the only way to perfectly utilize the power was to have a fire attribute talent, so it wasn't a perfect fit for the Mo family. After all, their Mo family did not have any gifted martial artists with fire attribute talent. And nowadays, Chu Mo, however, took out a gold-level sword martial skill, which naturally caused the Mo clan's old ancestor to be a bit surprised. At that moment, it was carefully studied. A few moments later, a look of shock passed over his face. Surprisingly, it's an attribute-less sword martial art. And the power is much stronger than my clan's family-transmitted sword technique. I'm afraid it's already at the extreme end of the gold-level martial arts. That's an expensive gift. Old ancestor Mo couldn't help but suck in a breath of cool air. Although the Bright Light King had also given Chu Mo a gold-grade gun technique martial art back then, there were very few martial artists who practiced gun techniques, and unless they actually met someone suitable, otherwise, it wasn't worth much to most martial artists. The only thing that has value is in the eyes of the right person. And this pouring sky sword code, in the Mo family's view, was undoubtedly very important. It is priceless. Such a gift, how can my Mo family repay it? He couldn't help but sigh. Just as the Mo clan's oldest ancestor was feeling shocked and emotional over it, at this moment, Chu Mo had already returned to the villa quiet room. Chu Mo took out the jade album left by King Mingguang and his spiritual power probed into it, immediately seeing a huge topographical map containing a detailed route starting from the large base in Jinling, all the way to the super base in Zhonghai, as well as in the middle of this path, the locations and names of dozens of small and medium-sized bases were individually labeled. Even the gathering places of powerful ferocious beasts were purposely circled. It's very detailed at a glance. And beyond that, what made Chu Mo even more remarkable was that this journey was actually 800,000 kilometers long. With such a long distance and so many dangerous areas to cross along the way, I'm afraid that even for a King Realm powerhouse, there is a certain amount of risk. It appears that if I want to go over there, I still need to bring my strength to the next level, so that I can be foolproof. Chu Mo thought darkly. Although his strength was already strong enough to rival the King Realm, after all, he wasn't going over alone this time, but also had to bring along Chen Shiwei and Li Youwei's siblings. If he encountered a strong enemy, he could leave instantaneously by relying on his spatial talent, but the three Chen Shiwei could not get away. So, Chu Mo had to have his strength grow by leaps and bounds. In my current situation, if I want my strength to skyrocket in a short period of time, the only way to do so is to rely on the Great Diffusion Divine Light Mysterious Code and the Dragon Elephant Indestructible Scripture. 3 months. Strive to advance both of these techniques to a new realm within 3 months. Among other things, the search for the star gold should also be intensified. If it can be found, it will be able to build my Nianli weapon, making the power of my spiritual Nianli increase greatly, and become a most secretive killer mace. Chu Mo thought darkly subsequently. Within the next few moments, Chu Mo then once again returned to the secret realm and began his seclusion. Every day he cultivated these 2 techniques with all his might, hoping to make them metamorphose. Chapter 188, We'll get married when we get to the Zhonghai Superbase. Accompanied by the Dragon Image Undying Scripture's continuous operation. Every day, a large amount of heaven and earth yuan qi was constantly being absorbed by Chu Mo, plus there was also the assistance of the purple gold creation pill, and a vague tingling and crunchy sensation began to emanate from his skin. Every day, Chu Mo could feel the skin metamorphosing, and the genes and cells in his body were all metabolizing like crazy. Finally, just on the 10th day of Chu Mo's closed-door cultivation, he finally sensed a shackle coming from the heavens and earth in the form of a portal. This gate formed by the heavens and earth was so sturdy that it looked lofty and unbreakable. However, Chu Mo didn't feel the slightest bit discouraged, and directly swallowed all 3 of the last remaining purple gold creation pills in one gulp, and then fully operated the Dragon Elephant Imperishable Scripture, crazily quenching his fleshly body and impacting the shackles in the underworld. Again and again, one after the other. I don't know how long the impact took. I don't know how much time it took either. All of a sudden. Boom. After countless impacts, the hardened gate finally began to shake, followed by a crack. Along with his continuous impact, the cracks on the gate increased. Eventually. Boom. In the darkness, a violent explosive sound came from his mind, and this gate formed by the shackles of heaven and earth was shattered by the impact of Chu Mo's blast. Next moment he then felt his body steeply lighten, and countless heaven and earth yuan qi surged into Chu Mo's body, sublimating his skin and helping him to complete the last step of his metamorphosis. At the same time, a terrifying aura swept out from him, causing his body to enter another level. Chu Mo, who had already had 2 breakthrough experiences, knew very well. He had already broken the 3rd flesh-body extreme realm, officially entering the 3rd layer of the Dragon Image Imperishable realm. After such a long time, I finally broke the 3rd flesh-body extreme realm, making my body able to withstand 400 times the increased power. Chu Mo opened his eyes and a smile of excitement appeared on his face. But the violet gold creation pill, however, is gone. Although he had the formula for this kind of elixir, but to refine this kind of elixir required quite a few precious heavenly materials and treasures, and Chu Mo had already put out a quest for a long time in the heavenly pavilion, and had not been able to find any, and this set of techniques was very peculiar, Without the assistance of the purple gold creation pill, it would be very difficult for the dragon image undying scripture to subsequently improve. Even if he was given 10 years, he wouldn't be able to break the fourth flesh-body extreme realm. The Zhonghai Superbase should have the materials needed to refine this elixir. Chumo thought darkly. He planned to wait until he got to the Zhonghai Superbase before poking around. Now that I have broken the third flesh extreme realm and gained 400 times the limit increase power, according to the fact that I now have about 950,000 elephants of flesh power, under 400 times the increase, it would be equal to about 400 million elephants of power. Such power has already surpassed that of a peak king realm level powerhouse. After coming to this conclusion, even Chumo could not help but reveal a touch of shock. Having just become a venerable, he was able to suppress a peak king realm powerhouse. Although it was only an ordinary peak of the king realm. If he encountered a king realm powerhouse with powerful talents, Chumo would still be slightly inferior in terms of overall strength. However, this represented that his strength had grown by leaps and bounds. More importantly, Chumo also had the great diffusion divine light and the spatial talent, plus spiritual thoughts. With the help of these three, even if he were to face a king realm powerhouse with a powerful talent, he would still have the power to fight. Next, continue cultivating and comprehending the great diffusion divine light secret code. Chummer decided. He then fell into seclusion once again, cultivating his Yuan Shin. Only. This retreat did not last long before he received news from Tianpeng, thus forcing him to suspend his cultivation. Chen Shiwei had been injured. Learned about it. Chumo immediately left from the secret realm and returned to the villa, seeing the pale-faced Chen Shiwei. Xiaowei, I heard Tianpeng say that you were injured, what's going on? Chumo immediately asked with concern. Thanks for hanging on, husband, I'm fine. Chen Shi shook his head slightly, then recounted the situation. It turned out that Chen Shiwei was exploring in the wilderness and stumbled upon an opportunity, and after going in to explore, he encountered an upper level 6 ferocious beast, and Chen Shiwei was suddenly attacked and injured later on. Fortunately, Tianpeng was right next to him to look after it. Thus fighting that upper level 6 ferocious beast, Chen Shiwei took the opportunity to get the treasure, and the two of them escaped from there. After learning the original story, Chumo checked Chen Shiwei's body again and found that she really only suffered some shocks to her internal organs, plus some bruises on her body. This kind of trauma, for Chen Shiwei, who was already at the cultivation level of a 4 directions Shin general, would quickly heal, and the wounds would all be restored to their original state, leaving no trace behind. This caused Chumo to let out a sigh of relief. However, he still urged Chen Shiwei not to do such dangerous things in the future. After all, that was a class 6 upper class ferocious beast, comparable to a human 8 desolate exalted late-stage martial artist, while Chen Shiwei was only at the cultivation level of a 4 square Shin general. The gap between the two was too great. The slightest misstep would end in death. I know, I won't take any chances like that in the future. Chen Shiwei nodded obediently. But then, she suddenly spread a smile and said rather mysteriously, husband, guess what treasure I got from that chance? Having said that, without waiting for Chumo to guess, she directly took out a jade box from her storage bag, and when she opened it, there was immediately a fresh fragrance that filled the entire house. This is Traceless Tianji? Looking at the treasures in the jade box, Chumo could not help but stare. Traceless celestial qi, a main medicine needed to refine the purple gold creation pill. Chumo had previously been searching in the Jinling Great Base, but had never found any trace of it, and now it appeared in the hands of Chen Shiwei. Is it hard to believe that she's taking a chance on picking it because she found it? Yeah, I knew you needed it, husband, so I sought it out especially for you. Chen Shi said with a smile. Hearing these words, Chumo couldn't help but feel his heart fluttering for a moment and froze in place. What a blessing in life. To have such a good man? Shiwei. Looking at the woman in front of him, Chumo's heart was so moved that he couldn't help but directly take her in his arms. Originally suddenly suffered such an attack by Chumo, Chen Shiwei's body instantly stiffened, and her brain went blank. But not before she subconsciously resisted. Immediately afterward, Chu Mo's voice could be heard. After some time, I'll take you to the Zhonghai superbase. Then, when we get settled there, let's get married. The words fell. Chen Shiwei instantly froze in place. After Chu Mo finished speaking, he did not see Chen Shiwei respond for a long time, and could not help but lower his head, looking at the young girl in his arms. Just in time to meet face to face, he was looking at Chen Shiwei's cheeks, also looking at him with a gaze like a jewel, his eyes slightly lost in thought. The moment the four eyes met, Chen Shiwei's cheeks were slightly red, seemingly a little shy. But she didn't dodge, instead she watched in awe. Shiwei, you. Trummer wanted to say something. But before he could finish his words, he saw Chen Shiwei suddenly look back and then nodded seriously. The eyes carried a radiant glow and brightness. Looking straight at Chu Mo, he solemnly said, "Good." After agreeing to get married when they arrived at the superbase in Zhonghai, the two of them completely opened all their hearts in the next few moments. The two spent a few days together in close proximity, and then Chen Shiwei began to wrap up the preparations for the next trip. Chu Mo, on the other hand, returned to the secret realm and continued to cultivate the Great Diffusion Divine Light secret code. Day after day of practicing, Chu Mo only felt that his Yuan Shen was growing stronger with each passing day, becoming tougher and tougher as time passed. In the meantime, in the Violet Mansion, the Yuan Shen even emitted a circle of extremely bright golden light, wrapped in a subtle and extreme breath, illuminating the entire Violet Mansion with a clear and bright light. Buzz. 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 Over time, Chu Mo could feel that his Yuan Shen was continuously solidifying and becoming stronger and stronger. And the golden light in the Violet Mansion intensified. Time rushed by, and in the blink of an eye a month had passed this day. In Chu Mo's Violet Mansion, the golden light was once again prevalent to the extreme, and in addition to the golden light, almost no other colors could be seen anymore. The radiant light even shone through the Violet Mansion, shining outside, reflecting the entire basin, and even within a radius of dozens of miles, in a golden light. Phew. Suck. Phew. Suck. The golden light was contracting and expanding, just like a person's breath. After a long time, boom! A buzzing sound came from the Violet Mansion, as if some sort of bottleneck had been broken. Chu Mo only felt a steep shock in his spirit and a wave of it spread throughout his body. In the meantime, these golden rays of light also began to contract dramatically, eventually condensing into the shape of a golden round wheel that was suspended in Chu Mo's mind. Finally, the Great Diffusion Divine Light mysterious code has stepped into the second layer. Chu Mo opened his eyes, and a flash of essence appeared in his eyes. But soon the glint of refinement then retracted with it. Returning to his senses, Chu Mo first probed his consciousness into the Violet Mansion. Immediately, one could clearly see that two golden wheels had appeared on one's Yuan Shen. The first was the inner circle of golden wheels, which were very solid and looked tough. The outer circle, on the other hand, carried a sense of emptiness, rather like a feeling that it could break at any time. Trummer did not let it. Instead, there was a smirk on his face. It only took less than 2 months to already break through the Dragon Elephant Undying Scripture and the Great Diffusion Divine Light mysterious code, a little faster than I expected. And next, it is to deal with the closing, as well as waiting for news of the Star Gold. Whether you can find the Star Gold or not, leave within a month. Thinking so after Chu Mo cultivated for a few days again and solidified this second golden wheel, he left this secret realm and returned to the base. Chapter 189 Departure. Respectfully farewell Venerable Chu. After returning to the base, Chu Mo sold all of the miscellaneous materials he was carrying that he could handle, and those that he couldn't handle were directly put into the treasury of the Heavenly Hall. At the same time, he also announced within the Tianji Pavilion that he was about to leave the Jinling Grand Base and head to the Zhonghai Super Base. Learned the news. All the martial artists up and down the pavilion were very upset. However, they were not in a good position to stop them, because they all knew in their hearts that for a heavenly pride like the pavilion master, a mere Jinling large base would definitely not be the end of his journey. Therefore every martial artist gave their heartfelt blessings to Chu Mo's departure. After bidding them farewell, Chu Mo then had someone summon Chasing Wind. Soon, Chasing Wind had then arrived in the main hall and met Chu Mo. He also knew about the news that Chu Mo was going to leave, and for that, he was feeling nothing but envy. For Chasing the Wind, it would be a miracle for him to break through to the sovereign realm in his lifetime. Now that he had come to the Jinling Great Base again, he had gained Chu Mo's regard and become a deacon elder of the Tianji Pavilion, and he was able to receive so many resources every month, thus giving him the possibility of becoming a Four Directions town general. Perhaps in the future, if he was lucky, there was still a certain possibility of stepping into the 8 Desolate Exalted level, but if he was unlucky, it was estimated that this life would be the peak of a Jin general. His end was almost predictable. Trummer knew it too. But he was helpless about it. There was no way he was going to go all out to help Wind Chaser. For Chu Mo, it was already a bit of a stretch for him to be able to fulfill his own cultivation needs, plus help Qin Shiwei as well as bring along his 2 disciples. And Chasing the Wind was just an outsider after all. For Chu Mo to be able to bring him into the Celestial Qi Pavilion and allow him to have the opportunity to step into the 8 Desolate Exalted realm was already benevolent. What's more, there were 2 conditions that had to be met in order to enter the Zhonghai Superbase, but neither of them were suitable for Chasing the Wind. Chu Mo couldn't forcefully bring him over right now either. Perhaps when Chu Mo's strength became strong in the future, and he became a top powerhouse in the Zhonghai Superbase, he could bring him over, but in Chummer's opinion, it was not necessary at all. The martial Dao of the Zhonghai Superbase was indeed prosperous, but the more prosperous it was, the more intense the fights and competition would be. In terms of Chasing the Wind's strength and talent, it was simply not suitable to stay in the Zhonghai Superbase, and even if he was forced to go there, he would only be in the middle and lower levels. Might as well stay at the big base in Jinling. In the future, if he had the opportunity to cultivate to the 8 Desolate Exalted realm, with his strength, coupled with the residual power that Chu Mo had left behind, it would be enough to allow Wind Chaser to live well here. Not to mention, Chu Mo also planned to hand over Tianji Pavilion to him to take care of. Ever since the establishment of Tianji Pavilion, I've always acted as a hands-off boss, and this place is running in perfect order under your care. I've seen it all before my eyes. Now that I'm about to leave this place, the position of the second head of Tianji Pavilion will be given to you. Chummer opened his mouth. This subordinate is only the cultivation of the late Zhongsher. What virtue and how can be able to serve as Tianji Pavilion Master? Please Pavilion Master, another selection of talented people. Hearing this, Chasing Wind froze, and hurriedly said in a sincere manner, "You don't have to be overly modest, I'm sure you can do it." Chu Mo said and added, "Although your strength is indeed a bit low, but it doesn't matter. Before I leave, I will instruct a few other elders to listen to your commands, and I will also greet the other clans and the Chuiyu Merchant Alliance, so that they will all take care of you. In addition, this is some of my accumulations. There are also some of my cultivation tips and martial arts secrets in it, which may be able to benefit you on your martial arts path." Saying that, Chu Mo took out a storage bag and handed it to Chasing Wind. After hearing that, Wind Chaser did not say anything else, but silently took the storage bag. Then he solemnly made a big bow. "Many thanks, Pavilion Master." Subsequently, Chu Mo explained some more things, and Chasing Wind memorized them all. Having said that, Chummer then planned to leave. However, at this very moment, a martial artist walked over, saying that Deacon Elder Su Chuan had come to pay his respects. Seeing the situation, Chasing the Wind immediately offered his farewell. In the middle of the great hall, Chu Mo sat in the first place, and Su Chuan stepped in. "Elder Su, what do you want with me?" Chumhum asked, curiously. As for Su Chuan, at this moment, feeling the thick pressure coming from Chu Mo's body, the terrifying aura that was like being in an abyss, almost making it difficult to breathe, his heart could not help but be secretly frightened. Pavilion Master's cultivation is getting stronger and stronger. Thinking so, he hastily collected his mind and spoke, I learned that the Pavilion Master is leaving, and thus I have come to say goodbye. Also, a message related to Star Gold for the Pavilion Master. What? Upon hearing these words, Chuemo immediately condensed his gaze and asked after him, Elder Su, you know the news of the Star Gold? The subordinate is not sure. Su Chuan opened his mouth and said, in the beginning, in order to enhance my strength, so I have always been in the wilderness and killing ferocious beasts, and have been to many places, and have also become acquainted with many martial artists, and at a time by chance, I had heard them speak of a certain large base appearing a piece of treasure that had been passed down from the Zhonghai super base, and sold for an astonishing price, and coupled with the fact that this item was too strange. It had therefore been taken by many martial artists as a strange anecdote recounted. Later on, when the Pavilion Master searched for this item, my subordinate immediately felt that this was quite similar to the treasure that I had heard of at the beginning, only that I was still a little unsure in my heart, coupled with the fact that this news was about the Zhonghai super base, which is not only far away, but also nearly 10 years ago from now, and thus did not say anything about it. However, since you, Pavilion Master, intend to travel to the Zhonghai super base, perhaps you can search for it when you arrive. Su Chuan said truthfully, do you remember how they described this treasure in the beginning? Chuemo asked. Su Chuan recalled and said, according to their description, it was said that this substance was soft, like a liquid, yet it resembled a fruit core, and that it contained an infinite amount of starlight. Hearing those words, Chumo's eyes immediately stared. He was almost certain of it. This is definitely Star Gold. This was because these characteristics were exactly the same as those described in the chopping spirit thought force forging yuan technique. In that case, it's likely that the Zhonghai super base has Star Gold. But that was 10 years ago, and I don't know if we can still find it. We'll just have to wait until we get to the place and poke around a bit. With this thought in his mind, Chuemo came back to his senses and said to Su Chuan, this information that Elder Su has spoken of is indeed useful to me, and according to my promise, I can give you yuan stones worth $50 billion, and you can also choose heavenly treasures of equal value. It's just a matter of providing information that I don't know whether it's true or not. Without merit, how dare my subordinate ask for treasures? Su Chuan waved his hand and refused. However, Chuemo insisted on giving it, only to see that Su Chuan kept refusing it, and after some thought, he took out a jade book from his bosom and said, I see that Elder Su Chuan, you use a sword, so I do have a gold-grade sword technique martial art here that might be suitable for you. Said then he handed Su Chuan the tilted heavenly sword codex. Su Chuan still insists that he doesn't want it. Chuemo persuaded, I'm going to leave the Jinling Big Base soon, at that time, Tianji Pavilion will have no venerable level powerhouses. You as the only Jin general peak level martial artist in the pavilion, have the most hope to step into the 8 desolate venerable realm. This sword technique is given to you, firstly, to express my gratitude for the news that you've provided, and secondly, I hope that in the future, you can take care of Tianji Pavilion for a little while. Hearing this, Su Chuan hurriedly said, since my subordinate has joined the Tianji Pavilion, I will always be a Tianji Pavilion martial artist in this life. And I don't need the Pavilion Master to say anything more, but my subordinate will take care of 1 or 2 things. Having said that, if you don't have the strength, how can you take care of it? Chummer said this. Su Chuan was a little hesitant. So this sword dictionary, you'd better take it. Chuemo smiled, and immediately handed the sword dictionary to Su Chuan's hand. Having reached this point, Su Chuan no longer hesitated, and at that moment, he solemnly performed a big salute, subordinate, many thanks to Pavilion Master. After dealing with the Tianji Pavilion. In the next few days, Chuemo went to successively visit the old ancestors of the Gu, Zhou, and Shen clans, as well as old ancestor Mo of the Chui Merchant Alliance, respectively telling them about his upcoming departure from the Jinling large base, and asking them to try to take care of one or two of them when they encountered trouble in the Tianji pavilion. The old ancestors of the major powers naturally agreed in one breath. And a personal guarantee. Their several powers would work together with Tianji pavilion to advance and retreat, and would never let Tianji pavilion weaken. For this assurance, Chu Mo still believed it. His prestige has opened up completely. And he had once saved the lives of all these old ancestors. Even if it was for his sake, the several major powers would take care of Tianji pavilion for a moment or two. And later. As long as he didn't fall and his cultivation kept rising, these forces wouldn't dare to have crooked thoughts about the heavenly hall. On this day, it was finally the day that Chu Mo left outside the large base in Jinling. The Gu, Zhou, and Shen family ancestors, Chuiyu merchant alliances Mo old ancestor and Mo Yongnan, as well as Mo Shanshan, along with Tianji pavilion led by Chasing the Wind, plus Su Chuan and a host of other elders and martial artists, as well as some of the local martial artists from the Jinling Great Base who had learned that Chu Mo was leaving, had all come to the main gate of the base, coming to see him off. Looking at how many martial artists came to see him off, Chu Mo was also a bit surprised, then waved his hand and said, "Gentlemen, Chu Mo will take his leave now, and we will meet again in another day." Having said that, then he boarded the back of the Sky Rock with Chen Xiaowei, and Li Yuwei and Li Xuanji also hurriedly followed. Fresh. The golden-winged rock raised its head and lifted its wings, rolling up a large wave of air, then rocked upwards, straight into the green clouds. Behind the entrance to the large base in Jinling, countless martial artists saluted in unison, chanting in unison, "Greetings to Venerable Chu." The voices were linked together so much so that they reached right into the middle of the clouds and spread to every corner of the large base in Jinling. The moment all the martial artists raised their heads and looked in the direction Chu Mo had left, their eyes showing longing and respect. "They're clear. This farewell. With Venerable Chu's natural talent, it would be difficult to meet again in the future. Even if I could see it again." Perhaps at that time, Venerable Chu had already become a figure in the top of the clouds, and they didn't even have the qualifications to look at him anymore. Everyone couldn't help but sigh at the thought. Chapter 190, a king-level ferocious beast that manipulates time. Standing on the back of the Sky Rock, Chu Mo put his hands behind his back and gazed at the increasingly smaller Jinling large base, and couldn't help but let out a slightly long breath since coming to the big base in Jinling. It's not a very long time, but when you think about it, it's not a short time. From an obscure martial artist, he had grown and stepped through Zhongshe, Shen General, and eventually stepped into the Eight Wastelands exalted realm, and his strength was comparable to that of a king realm powerhouse. And now he left from here again. For Chu Mo, this place was just like Luoyang Base, just a small beginning. When he arrived at the Zhonghai Super Base, it would be a much bigger stage, and his future would become broader and broader. Thinking so, Chu Mo withdrew his gaze, sat down on his knees, and closed his eyes in enlightenment. The Sky Rock was fast. Plus, he had now grown to the peak level of level 5, and was only one step away from becoming a level 6 beast, so there weren't any beasts looking for trouble in the blink of an eye. It was already far away from the large base in Jinling. A journey across 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers. Without realizing it, they had already flown a distance of over 200,000 kilometers. And just then, however, there was suddenly a raptor with an aura infinitely close to level 7 that stopped in front. It seemed to treat the golden-winged rock as prey, fluttering its wings and whistling. The hurricane it brought up was so powerful that it made it somewhat impossible for the Sky Rock to stabilize its body. "Master, a ferocious beast is coming." Seeing that the ferocious beast was about to come into sight and devour them in one gulp, and Chu Mo still hadn't opened his eyes, Li Xuanji whispered a reminder. At this point, this ferocious beast had already come close. The open mouth seemed to be able to swallow both heaven and earth, and a rich, fishy odor came out, wanting to make people nauseous and just for a moment. Clank! Suddenly, there was a sudden sound of a sword being drawn out of its sheath, and immediately, a curtain of red-colored blades was seen steeply cutting through the sky and landing in front of this ferocious beast. Pfft! Accompanied by the sound of blade chi entering the flesh, the body of this ferocious beast that emitted a powerful aura instantly stiffened in place, and then its body steeply split in two from the center, falling down towards the ground. After slaying the ferocious beast, the sky rock continued to fly with its wings. And Chu Mo was still sitting cross-legged in place to cultivate, if not for the autumn-killing blade in front of his knee still faintly trembling. I'm afraid that no one would be able to know that this ferocious beast had actually been decapitated by him. Master's strength is so strong. Seeing this scene, Li Xuanji couldn't help but show a flash of brightness in his eyes. Ever since he worshipped Chu Mo, he had always stayed within the heavenly hall of opportunity to contain his body, and had not seen Chu Mo strike with his own eyes. It was only from the accounts of the martial artists in the pavilion and Wind Chaser that they knew about those amazing feats of Chu Mo. For example, when he was at the Luoyang base, he used the realm of a martial artist to kill a 5th-level ferocious beast. After arriving at the large base in Jinling, he even used the strength of the 4 directions Shin General to slay 2 Su family-honored masters with a single slash, wiping out the entire Su family. In the Xian-level rift, for example, he single-handedly overthrew the conspiracy of the 10,000 Beasts sect and killed more than a dozen 8 desolate exalted. All of the cave heavenly king realms had to treat their masters with respect. The old ancestors of all the major powers faced their masters with fear and trepidation. His ears were getting tired of hearing about these deeds. While making him worship Chu Mo more and more, he also became more and more curious about how high Chu Mo's strength was. And now, he was finally seeing it. Although it was only a glimpse, it was this knife that left a deep impression in Li Xuanji's mind. Bully. Terror. It seems to be able to cut through the sky and split the earth. It can take the light of the sun and the moon. This is the kind of weapon a martial artist should use. From now on, I'm going to use a knife too. Become a powerful swordsman like Master. He decided in his mind after flying for another 100,000 kilometers. It was dark by now. Since there was no rush to catch up, Chu Mo let the sky rock land and found a place to settle down and rest for the night. After all, Li Xuanji hadn't cultivated yet and still needed to eat. There was no talk all night. Early the next morning, the group continued their journey. Near noon, they arrived in front of a large, vast and boundless lake. It's said to be a large lake, but it's actually the equivalent of the ocean. Before the great change in the heavens and earth, this place was called Taihu Lake. Now that the blue star has been enlarged by hundreds or thousands of times, this great lake has also become an infinite sea, with a diameter of at least tens of thousands of kilometers as well. In this lake, there are bound to be countless powerful ferocious beasts. Chu Mo took out the map that Ming Wang had given him and realized that it really did record this great lake, which was rumored to have quite a few powerful ferocious beasts, and it was even likely that there would be existences that exceeded the 7th level or higher. With my current strength, I'm afraid it's not a small danger to rashly fly over the lake. In case one encounters a terrifying existence above the 7th level, there is absolutely no chance of survival. Better go around. Chu Mo secretly decided. Then he had the sky rock turn its head and fly around the shore of this large lake. There were quite a few powerful ferocious beasts on the shore. There were no less than a dozen heads that Chu Mo had observed alone. Luckily, the sky rock flew very high, and thus did not thus their attention. There were scares along the way, and they finally crossed this Taihu Lake, which was as huge as an ocean. This great lake is so huge, and there are so many powerful ferocious beasts, it seems to be an unexplored barbaric land. If one's cultivation improves in the future, one may be able to come here to explore. Chu Mo glanced back at the large lake that gradually disappeared in front of him, and secretly thought in his heart. The rest of the way was very quiet. Although he had also encountered some powerful ferocious beasts on the way, and there were even 7th level ferocious beasts, but apart from one that came up ungratefully and tried to attack, he was subsequently killed by Chu Mo. From there, Chu Mo obtained a Morning Star ranked Wind Attribute Talent plus a portion of Grade 7 Fierce Beast Essence Blood. Those remaining King Beasts, after exchanging a few blows with Chu Mo and gaping to the fact that he wasn't a soft target, then fled in droves. Fusion. Chu Mo directly fused this Morning Star level Wind Attribute Talent, and along with a slight pain coming from it, very quickly, he had finished absorbing it. Target, Chumhum. Physique, Transcendent Level Indestructible Thunder Body, Transcendent Level Supreme Blade Body. Talents, Morning Star Level Sword Cultivation Talent, Morning Star Level Wind Attribute Talent, Transcendent Level Fire Attribute Talent, Transcendent Level Earth Attribute Talent, Transcendent Level Metallic Talent, Transcendent Level Wood Attribute Talent, Higher Spatial Talent, Higher Water Attribute Talent, Higher Darkness Attribute Talent, Medium Pupil Talent. Unsurprisingly, the Wind Attribute Talent has not undergone a metamorphosis. Still Morning Star level. Glancing at his information, Chu Mo realized that his Wind Attribute Talent was still at the Morning Star level, and had not undergone a metamorphosis after absorbing it to the Transcendent level, but Chu Mo could feel that his Wind Attribute Talent had grown to a certain extent. It's about a 20% boost. In that case, 5 stacks of Morning Star level talent should be enough to cause it to be metamorphosed. I also wonder what kind of talent level would be above the Morning Star level. Chu Mo thought darkly. He hadn't found any talent above the Morning Star level so far. If it wasn't available in the Zhonghai Super Base either, then Chu Mo would have to decide to metamorphose his talent through stacking. Even though it was a bit of a disadvantage for him, there was no way around it. Boom. Just then, on the ground in the distance, a violent fluctuation of yuan qi suddenly came from the ground, accompanied by a 5-colored flashy light that rose up to the sky. In the meantime, a ferocious beast hiss filled with anger resounded, spreading across the heavens and earth. This breath. Could it be that a treasure has appeared? Chu Mo's expression moved, then he immediately commanded, Tianpeng, wait here, I'll go over and take a look. Fresh. The Sky Rock received the order and immediately levitated in midair. Chu Mo, on the other hand, spoke to Qin Shiwei, and then with a flash of his body, he quickly left the place. Soon, he had used his dark attribute talent and arrived nearby. Spiritual energy probed out and immediately discovered that a young teenage girl was frantically flying away with an old man not far away. And looking at the aura on their bodies, it was surprising that they were all at the king level in succession. But at the moment, these two kings were, however, being chased by a ferocious beast behind them that had fallen into a violent rage. Seeing that the ferocious beast was about to catch up, this old man shouted, "Miss, you go first, I'll stop this ferocious beast," said. He then directly stopped his figure and turned his head to block the pursuing ferocious beast. That king-level ferocious beast was very strong, and it seemed to have an extremely bizarre ability. In the middle of the fight, the old man's body's aura was actually gradually decaying, and his hair, which was originally still quite black, was actually gradually turning white, as if his lifespan had been weakened in an invisible manner. In the meantime, the old man's actions also became very slow, and his movements looked extremely stiff. So much so that when he was clearly in the middle stage of the king realm, he was directly seriously injured just in accordance when facing this ferocious beast in the early stage of the king realm. "I'll fight you." The severely injured old man immediately burst out in rage, and then used some sort of realm enhancement mythic art, allowing his strength to climb higher and higher, but the consequence of this was that some cracks began to appear on his body. Large streams of blood also came out furiously. Roar. At this point, the ferocious beast suddenly let out a roar, and the old man's figure immediately slowed down for a long time. And then the ferocious beast directly rushed over, and with a slap of its huge claws, this king realm level old man's body exploded apart with a loud bang. Completely dead. From the time the old man turned his head to fight with the ferocious beast to his death, it was only a few breaths. After killing this old man, the ferocious beast once again turned his head and realized that the young girl had already fled a long way away, which instantly made him even more angry. Then with another roar, a bizarre ripple steeply escaped, instantly spreading out to the surrounding area of hundreds of miles. The young girl's flying figure immediately slowed down. And in between, this ferocious beast then quickly pounced over. Chu Mo, who had witnessed all of this with his own eyes, had completely frozen in place at this moment, while a flash of disbelief surfaced on his face. This ferocious beast. To be able to manipulate time?